Wife says she'd be fine if I had a secret child, so I am hiring an actor to test her. It's by user Mark Weston. Need a fake kid to piss off my wife. My wife and I are watching Elf together and we saw the part where Buddy, Will Ferrell's real dad, James Caan, tells his wife about Buddy. And his wife, Mary Steenburgen, gets excited about this surprise adult kid that pops into their life from a time before they knew each other. I point out to my wife that it's a little unbelievable that she, Mary Steenburgen, would immediately be on board. I then comment that she, my wife, would actually be mad at me in this situation even if I genuinely didn't know this kid existed and it was conceived before I had met her. She denies it, but I know my wife. We're in our early 40s and have been married 10 years, together for 12. So I need a 20-ish kid to knock on the door and tell me they're my kid and that they just wanted to meet me. Gotta be convincing and really talk about how your mom and I were once really happy before she died or something tragic. Dealer's choice. Job pays $100. Gender, race, etc. don't matter so long as you can pass for early 20s. Shouldn't take more than an hour of conversation, then you get a call or something and have to leave. Want to do this soon after the new year. You come up with the backstory and I'll play along. I'll give you a little information up front after you take the job. Well, this can go one of two ways. It can either blow up into a really bad argument between you and your wife, or it can turn out to be her really good joke that your wife absolutely gets and she has fun with it just as you. I can't say which way it would go because I don't know your wife, but you seem to know, so hopefully it goes well. Now if it was my wife, I don't know if I could pull off this joke, not because, she would be incredibly angry. I don't think she would. I think she might find it funny as well, but it's because we live in an entirely different country and getting somebody from Chile to come over to Germany to play this prank would require a lot of logistic costs that I just don't want to go through. What do you guys think? Would you pull a joke like this one? Let me know in the comments section, and now let's check out what the community thinks about this. Diaz de Fuego says, "This sounds like a bad idea, but please post a follow-up once you go through with it." And OP responds, "Worst case scenario, oh, yeah. This could go badly. But sometimes being right in a marriage is worth it." Bit Outside 1443 says, "Why do I see in a couple of weeks a post going, 'My wife kicked me out'? What cheap-in is the best?" And OP responds, "I wouldn't have the courage to post that here, but you might see a nib along those lines." Breaking Ashley Lynn says, "This literally happened to me in real life 2 weeks after I married my husband. 15-year-old daughter from a one-night stand found him. My husband did not know. It was crazy. But the second I saw her, I knew she was definitely his. Got DNA test to be sure and she was. It was way before we got together, so it was just a big surprise, not him cheating or anything." And Kibbles 137 says, "My prediction. In spite of phenomenal acting from you and your hired kid, kid deserves an Oscar. Your wife will see right through it. She will play Mary Steenburgen to a T and you will have to admit that she's a queen. You don't deserve her. You thank your lucky stars every day that she married you and she will eat it right up. You won't be in the metaphorical doghouse and you and your wife will like fictional kid and invite them to occasional events where you regale your friends with that funny story of how you tried to F your marriage. It'll be good. Can't wait to hear about it." Well, the community thinks that it can definitely blow up on OpsFace or it could be a great prank. So let's move on to the update to see how this story ends. First off, I am still married and my wife thoroughly enjoyed the prank. I didn't even have to sleep on the couch. So to the very dramatic naysayers, one of which compared my prank to spousal abuse, several diagnosed me with a number of mental illnesses and at least as many said I was childish and cruel. To you, I say, you're probably right. However, boo-boo, stick your head in doo-doo. We've been married a decade. We know each other well enough to know what's over the line and what's funny. That said, it was harder than I thought to secure a fake child. Sure, I had a large number of interested parties and even a couple fabulous candidates, one of which actually looked enough like me that I started wondering if one of you got my wife and were pulling the ultimate reverse card on my prank. Unfortunately, interested and committed are two very different things. Multiple potential sons and daughters made it to the planning stage and found one reason or another to bail out. Let me be clear. I do not blame these folks at all. I don't think I'd have the courage to send the first DM, let alone actually go through with the prank orchestrated by a complete stranger, but I did find a suitable actor with the courage to come through and I still think it was money well spent. So here's a synopsis of how it played out. No, there's no video proof. Saturday afternoon, my doorbell rang. My dog lost his mind as he is wont to do, and my wife answered the door since I had pretended to take a call moments earlier. My son, looking about 20 to 25 taller and better looking than I, asked if I was home. My wife motioned to me. I had conveniently just ended my fake phone call and I came to the door. My son, who even shared my first name, his idea not mine, said he had something kind of strange to talk to me about. I asked if he wanted to come in, which literally almost blew the whole thing because I would sooner sew off my own foot than invite people in my house, but my wife didn't think much of it. We came to the living room. I offered him a drink. He declined. My son is an excellent actor, by the way. He would later say it was the anxiety of the situation and not wanting to mess up that made his nervous demeanor so convincing. This is from memory, but it's pretty much everything. He starts off with, "Do you remember old ex-girlfriend I mentioned at least once in my 10-year marriage in front of my wife? Yeah. That's my mother." It was my wife who reacted first with, "Oh, no way." So I looked at her feigning ignorance and then back at my son and said, "Is she okay?" He says, "Yeah, she's fine, but that's not why I'm here." My wife was nearly busting out of her chair, totally engrossed and completely consumed with two strong theories. 1, her husband had a long-lost son, and more importantly, 2, her husband hasn't figured out yet that he has a long-lost son. So I say, "Out with it, kid. What's going on?" He says, "I'm 22 years old." My wife's eyes essentially bugged out of her head, having now confirmed her theories in her mind. She looks at me seemingly annoyed that I hadn't put the obvious puzzle pieces together and interrupts my fake kid. Nearly laughed, but I held it together. "I think he's telling you that he thinks you're his father." My acting is not so great, but I gave it a shot with weight. "What?" My look of shock could use some work, but it played for the audience. My son looked at me and says, "She's right, and I'm not here to ask for anything. In fact, I don't have a lot of time to stay, but I just wanted to meet you and maybe exchange numbers." And I go, "This is a lot to take in. I knew your mother a long time ago and she never said, I didn't know." He says, and I'm paraphrasing, "But this kid deserves an Oscar. She never told you. She only told me on Christmas morning. She didn't say anything bad about you, just that it was over and she was already dating my dad when she found out she was pregnant with me." So I go, "Wait, does your dad know?" And he says, "Of course. And I've always known he wasn't my biological father. He's a great dad. But lately, I've been wondering who my real father was. So I asked my mom and she told me." I respond, "Wow." I freely admit I had the easy part. My wife in the meantime is not saying anything, just taking it all in. Not much else to tell in terms of the production. We exchanged numbers, then he got his own fake phone call reminding him he was late for something or other, and I walked him out. The rest of the production was just my wife and I. I came back to the living room doing my best bewildered act. We talked about it, covered things like paternity test, etc., and it turns out I was way wrong. My wife wasn't mad, miffed, or even slightly annoyed. She was full on amazed, excited, and entertained by the whole thing. I waited a few hours before I fessed up, but before I did, she kept saying how cool it was that I might have a son. And then when I told her it was all a BS lie I made up to prove a point, she laughed a lot. I can't decide what amused her more: the effort I put into the ruse or the fact that I ended up proving her right in the process. Here are a couple of gems from my wife after I told her the truth. "Where did you find that guy? I'm glad your son wasn't a serial killer. I might have been mad if he came here looking for money. Next time, you can save a $100 and just assume you're wrong. You know, I'm going to get you back, right?" The last one has me a little worried. Smiley face. Well, hope you have got nothing to say except your wife sounds awesome. You sound really cool too, and your son deserves an Oscar. What a great story. I had so much fun reading it. Thanks so much for sharing. Hopefully, when your wife does get back at you, it's in as just a funny way as you've done. Sounds like you guys have a great marriage. So here's wishing you both the best in the future. OP. Thanks so much for sharing and take care. Now let's move on to the next post that also has an update. This post is from the subreddit, Am I the A-hole? Would I be the a-hole public? And it's by user Flumpamu. Would I be the a-hole if I told my best friend her husband asked me for money? I'm 46 female and I've been very close to Susan, 36 female, for over 15 years. Susan has quite recently got married to Carl, 45 male. They have a daughter together, 1 year old. He has preteen kids from a previous marriage. I like Carl and I've always thought he was a good guy who Susan loves and is happy with. I'm not close with him, but we get on well. She's always found it very hard to trust due to past trauma. Anyway, she confides in me and told me that a few months ago, Carl had confessed to her that he was in a lot of debt with credit cards, etc. She was angry at first at his secrecy, but she sorted it out, took away his credit cards and consolidated the debt, etc. She told me she just can't trust him with money. I am financially quite secure after the sudden death of my amazing husband aged 53, and I've had a few scammers take advantage of me when I was more vulnerable. Out of the blue, Carl messaged me to ask for money. He wrote a long spiel that he felt awful, that he couldn't even take Zuzin out for coffee as he has no money. Also, that she does so much for their family. He said that if I bought out some of his debt, then he wouldn't have to pay me the interest so he could pay it off quicker. I was really shocked as I don't have private chats with him, And I feel he's betraying Susan's trust by asking me. He said he's Susan's trust by asking me. He said he was sorry if it put me in an awkward position. He really has. I said no because I'm not a bank. I'm disabled after a life-changing accident and my money is part of my future security. But my dilemma is whether to tell Susan, he asked me. I'd find it extremely difficult to be listening to her talking about Carl's financial problems and not say anything. It would be lying by omission to me. But if I say something, I'm worried I'll derail their marriage. A couple of people I talked to have said to keep my mouth shut as their marriage isn't my business. But if she finds out through him, then she'll never trust me again. I just don't know what the right thing to do is. I think she has a right to know, but I don't want to be the reason for her suffering any unhappiness. Please help. OP. You're right. I think you need to tell your friend, but forget about you being the reason. Carl is the one that put you in this situation. Carl is the one that lied to his wife about his debt. He hid it from her and then married her. You wouldn't be the reason if their marriage suffered. Carl is the sole responsible of this. Also, Carl is not sorry for putting you in a difficult position. He's trying to manipulate you by trying to guilt you, saying, "Oh, I can't pay for coffee." Well, that's Carl's own damn fault. It's not yours, OP. You should tell your friend. And what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section. And now let's check out the community comments. Fun Yellow 6576 says, "Not the ol. You need to tell her as soon as possible. She needs to be able to make a decision based on the truth. You should encourage her to put a lockdown on her credit cards, as who knows what lengths he'll go to get money. He may have an unknown addiction he's trying to hide." And OP responds, "I wondered about the addiction angle. Maybe a gambling addiction or something? I'm seeing her on Monday, and I'd rather tell her face to face. I'm absolutely dreading it." Next back, 9472 says, "I would tell her. And first of all, he shouldn't be asking you for money. You're not good friends. He's your friend's husband who you get along with simply because he's your friend's husband. He's obviously heard about the insurance money from your husband's death and thought he'd try his chance. And considering how bad he is with money, you probably wouldn't even get a penny back. Just excuses. Not the whole." And Dopey responds, "The thing is, it's my husband's pension from grafting in a very tough job for 35 years. We didn't have life insurance. I get a widow's pension that was part lump sum after he died." And Appa194 says, "Follow your gut. She's your friend. Your loyalty lies with her. If he's doing something shady behind her back, then she deserves to know." And I didn't see you mention that he asked you to keep it between the two of you. I would say bring it up gently. "Hey, Susan, I didn't know how to bring this up or even if I should bring it up because I don't want to cause any trouble in any way, but I thought you should know Carl asked to borrow money. Since you mentioned that you don't trust Carl with money, I didn't feel comfortable loaning him any when he asked. Honestly, I didn't feel comfortable withholding it from you and risking you finding out later and being upset at me. Also, not the a-hole." Edit. I wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone for taking the time to read my situation and for adding their take or advice. I'm absolutely going to tell her. There is no other option. The thought of it makes my stomach knot. I lurch as I know how devastated she's going to be. But if she'll let me, I'll support her in any way I can, whatever she wants to do. I will post an update when it's done. Thank you so much again. You have all really helped me. Alright. Well, the community agrees that OP would not be the a-hole and Opset. It says everything we need to know to move on to the update to see how the story ends. Hi, lovely people. After posting here about telling Susan that her financially challenged husband Carl had asked to borrow money, well, I told her. I felt a bit sick telling her, but I was surprised by her reaction. She was relieved that it wasn't something worse. She didn't seem bothered at all. In fact, she told me she wasn't surprised he'd asked me. She said that she'd have been annoyed if I had said yes and he didn't tell her. She doesn't show emotion easily, so maybe she was more bothered than she let on. Of course, I'm glad she wasn't upset or that bothered, but at the same time, it makes me concerned that it didn't bother her, if that makes sense. As if him doing things and keeping them from her is normal. I think she might be checked out. Without going into details, she has always organized things so that if she or he leaves, she and their baby will be secure in all aspects. Because of a lot of loss and trauma in her past, she simply doesn't trust anyone, including her husband. It's always made me quite sad, but if she was getting her ducks in a row, I wouldn't be overly surprised, to be honest. Anyway, I've done the right thing in telling her, and all I can do is be here for her if there are further ramifications. Thank you everyone for your help. Well, OP, it does sound like your friend Susan is looking to check out soon. But as you've said, you've done the right thing and all you can do now is support your friend. So here's wishing you the best, OP. Thanks for sharing and take care. And now, let's finish this video with a quick mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user I am to sneeze. That time, my mom appended the dress code for my entire school. When I was little, my mom sent me to a private religious school. My family isn't religious, but they felt like I'd get a better education there. And when I switched to public school later, I found they were right. I was pretty far ahead. This school had uniforms. Boys wore button-down shirts with the school logo and blue slacks. Girls wore jumpers. My mom hated cleaning and ironing these white button-down shirts every day. I was one of 4 kids. Kids play and get grass stains. The shirts were taking up a lot of her time. Finally, she gave up and bought a bunch of white polo shirts and started sending us to school in those. Admin had a conniption fit about it and brought her in for a meeting. They opened the dress code rulebook and pointed out that these shirts were missing the logo, so they were in violation. My mom looked over the rules and confirmed that the lack of a logo was the only violation. They said yes. She thanked them and left, and the school probably thought it was over. But just to be petty, they sent a school-wide memo regarding the dress code. My mom took every polo shirt and stitched a homemade logo onto them. It wasn't hard to do as the logo was just the school initials. Admin was furious, but during the next meeting realized their hands were tied. The memo piqued the curiosity of other parents and they started asking my mom where she got the new school shirts. Apparently, she wasn't the only one sick of ironing and getting grass stains out. Suddenly, I wasn't the only one wearing a polo shirt to school. The worst part for the school was that despite tuition being pretty expensive, they also had a kickback deal going with a local clothing store for the uniforms. The store had a monopoly on the sales of those shirts. When business started lagging, the store made their own version of the polos for sale. Eventually, the original shirts were phased out entirely. That was over 30 years ago and my mom still loves telling that story. That's because it's a great story. OP. Your mom was dissatisfied with the situation and came up with a really cool way of going around it. And when the school got stupid about it, your mom simply helped change the paradigm. Good for her.